Yes.
Good evening, Nirupama. Namaste.
Namaste. Good evening.
Hello, everybody, and welcoming all the people in the audience, welcoming all the people on Facebook to the 17th Wisdom Talk. I've been told we've been having these conversations for a while now, clearly, and on this journey of wisdom and really discovering wisdom. I'm Abhishek and part of Wisdom Tree. At Wisdom Tree, our motto is to democratize wisdom. So the hope is that in service of evolution, we can tap into the wisdom of people who've been exploring, reflecting, and make it available to a lot more people. Wisdom Tree does work with not-for-profits on culture building and leadership development. So that's what our pursuit is. And today I'm joined with somebody who brings in significant thinking, I would say, in this domain of archetypes. I want to introduce Nirupama. So, Nirupama, I'm just going to do a short introduction. Nirupama is the co-founder of GLOW, which is Growing Leadership of Women. And she also has a not-for-profit, My Daughter is Precious, which is an initiative to educate and empower girls. Nirupama is an ICF certified coach, leadership development expert, a best-selling author, a columnist, over 20 years of coaching, 20,000 people, 950 hours of individual coaching, 75 organizations, 100 articles, 3 books. Wow.
Okay, that's a lot of numbers. Yeah.
Yes, that sounds like quite a journey, Nirupama. So thank you for accepting our invitation. Looking forward to this conversation with you. So,
Thank you,
Nirupama,
Abhishek. Pleasure to be here.
first question for every wisdom talk with every speaker is, what do you feel is wisdom? And in your case, I would like to also locate it into the context of your work, right? In working so extensively across with leaders and uh, in your own reflection, what is wisdom and what have you discovered as wisdom? What would you call wise?
Wise. Yes. Now I should come up with a very wise answer. But I'll share a couple of things that's coming to me. One is it's not mine. It's an interesting quotation I heard recently, which says, knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in fruit salad. So that to me was something which sounded, interesting about the division or the separation of knowledge and wisdom. To me, wisdom is really the ability or the process of combining information with intuition to get meaningful insights. And that's how I relate it to my work. And whether it's through the practice of coaching, through the practice of facilitation, or even the research I did for my latest book, it was a combination of all of these things, which leads to what I think, in my opinion, is wisdom. I think it's too vast a word to define it with, just one phrase. But to me, that's what it is.
So knowledge and intuition, the coming together of the two is what you would
Yeah,
essentially
and I
call
think,
this.
yes, and I think the outcome has to be something meaningful. Right? So that's why I say which leads to meaningful insights,
Hmm.
something that we can work with, something that contributes to, I think, enhancing our life and our consciousness. So I think wisdom inherently in its word has an element of service, and there's an element of contribution and meaning to it, which I think sets it apart from any kind of just pure knowledge or pure instinct and intuition.
Sure, sure. Just holding this question, and I couldn't stop it from popping up. Are women more intuitive than men, or is it across? Like, how are we? How's intuition spread across gender in your experience?
So let me put it this way. Traditionally, intuition is supposed to be a feminine quality, right? Just as the hard knowledge and data facts is supposed to be more masculine in nature. But which is why I said, unless you combine the two, you cannot have wisdom.
Hmm.
So yes, I would say typically research and studies show that women do have an ability to tap into intuition more than men. But I
Hmm.
believe both are important, and all of us have the ability to do both, right? Which is digest lots of logical information and knowledge, and tap into the power of our instinct and intuition. And because of certain patterns, and this is where I will say archetypes and patterns and socialization, what you use more, what you believe you're good at, tends to become associated with you as well. So yes, I would say yes, that is why intuition has been associated with women, but it's not necessarily only a female domain.
We'll explore that as we unpack also
Yeah.
the very interesting topic, which you already kind of alluded to, which is archetypes. You spoke about patterns already. So when we had this archetypes as a topic, it evoked a lot of curiosity around even what is an archetype. We hear that word, it sounds mysterious and heavy. So just curious, what is an archetype really? Like, how would you simplify it for someone who doesn't know this?
Yeah. So that is what I intend to do, simplify it, because there's a lot of information you can find. Jung was supposed to have coined this term archetype, but for me, an archetype is nothing but a pattern, a kind of a collective pattern of stories and behaviors that exist in our psyche, and not just psyche, in our world, in our consciousness and primarily subconsciousness. So there are patterns of behaviors, there are patterns of a story, and that gets repeated time and time again across cultures, across time, and these are what we call archetypes. Now, if you look at it, if you look at it simply, and I use this, I like to use examples of stories and movies. When you think of a hero, you have something in mind, right? You know what a hero does. A hero behaves in a particular way. And if you are the hero, you have to behave in that particular way. If you associate with the hero, you behave in a particular way. So the hero, the concept of a hero itself is an archetype. So we associate certain patterns of behavior with a symbol, with an image, with something which we can understand and see, and that is what we call an archetype. Right? Similarly, the heroine is a slightly different archetype than the hero, and we have an idea of what the heroine should say, should talk, should think, should feel, and that becomes an archetype. So it's a pattern. It's an association of behaviors, beliefs, and stories with something, with an image, with a symbol. So that's very simply, that's an archetype.
So it seems like nature or life has repeating patterns and habits, right? Like fractal nature of physical
Yes.
world has a fractal nature. And I think what I'm hearing you say is also a lived experience literally has a repeating fractal nature across time. Is that true? Like the units keep repeating? Is that
So let's say the patterns keep repeating. The patterns in our psyche keep repeating. So if you look at the human body, it's made up of certain parts, right? The stomach, the heart, and that constitutes the physical part. Like that, our brain, our psyche is made up of multiple parts. The psyche is made up of parts. There are many archetypes, patterns of behavior that we hold within us, which do get repeated over time. Right? So this concept of the hero has existed from a very, very long time. Right? So if you look at the ancient Greek myths, the Iliad, and the stories that come to us from mythology, all will demonstrate such patterns.
right?
So the fool, the clown, the hero, all of these are patterns that do perpetuate through time.
And across cultures also, right, Nirupama? Because you already said like the Greek and all cultures also. It seems transcultural.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's human really, right? It's in our collective, what we call collective human unconscious. And each culture brings a nuance to that particular archetype. So while they are universal, right? So the hero in Indian mythology might be slightly different. He might do a couple of other things, or he will never do something. But the hero in, let's say, Greek mythology will do certain things and he will never do certain things. But the essence of the hero as someone who's in a quest for something bigger and greater and who rescues people and the savior, the hero, those pretty much remain the same. But
Hmm.
yeah, so otherwise, there are cultural nuances,
There are
which is
cultural
what,
nuances.
when I wrote my book, I was trying to look at the universal archetype and look at what does it mean for us in India, especially what does it mean for women in India. What do these archetypes have in store for us? So yes, you'll find, let's say, the wise woman across cultures, right? So whether you go into Russian folk tales, whether you go into Native American cultures, or whether you come closer to India, we all have this wise woman. We know who this wise woman is, and she has certain universal characteristics. How the society treats her, what happens to her, could be different from certain cultures to culture. But there is more that we all have in common than what is very unique or separate. So some symbols and images might be separate, but the patterns across cultures are not that dissimilar.
Hmm.
Like
There
a
are so
villain,
many.
right? A villain is a villain.
Yeah, yeah. I was saying there are so many tempting segues from what you have just shared.
Mhm.
And I am just going to take the wise woman segue because in Blue Ribbon, and here we have a saying that it's the wise woman who should run the village. Like the village elder should be a wise
Wow.
woman, and
Wise
there
woman.
are
Mm.
and for me also mentors have been a mix of wise men and wise women. But I'm very curious about this Indian nuance to the wise woman archetype, and there is something about the older woman, right? The wisdom of having been through the whole woman's journey. So maybe if you can share a bit about feminine archetypes and the Indian nuance, I'm really curious about. Yeah, so I think that really evoked the most curiosity out
Yeah.
of the other threads.
Yeah, so my journey to this started with curiosity as well. So when I was reading, and in leadership development, sometimes we do use archetypes for people to understand themselves better as a tool for self-awareness, leading to personal transformation and growth. And I remember during one of the sessions, we were looking at the classic archetypes: king, warrior, magician, lover, which are essentially, they have a strong masculine energy to them. Right? When you say king, when you say warrior, when you say magician, it has a strong masculine flavor, connotation. The image that you get, because archetypes are nothing but image, the images that you get were all male. And as a woman, and I was working with women, I found these didn't connect too much. Right? I understood them here, but I couldn't see myself in any of those images. So as I started reading, of course, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and also looking at popular culture, the stories, I saw that yes, there are distinct archetypal patterns that women have. And what I did in my book is to give a language for that, using a language that we are familiar with. So you could take Greek goddesses, for example, and say, oh, this is an Artemis is an archetype, or Athena is an archetype, or Juno is an archetype. But let's face it, here in India, those names don't really mean too much to us. But when we start saying, so for me, the six archetypes, and I'll quickly tell them, are Kanya, Apsara, Veera, Ma, Rani, Rishika. So when you hear these names, they evoke a certain image, they evoke a certain energy. So we all know what Kanyadan is. We all know who a Rani is. So I found they connect at a deeper, more visceral level. So which is why um, taking the universal wisdom of archetypes, that was important for me, and kind of connecting it to our Indian culture and context, and looking at, therefore, what is the, and I'll use the word wisdom here, what is the wisdom that these archetypes have for us. So that's what I did. So if you take the wise woman, and for me, that's the Rishika archetype, the wise seeker. How does this show up, right? What does it mean for women? And how is the wise seeker different for women, whereas you have the typical sage magician archetype for men? And for that, you have to go to the stories that we have in our culture about wise women. Right? So, for example, one thing we found interesting, that the wise woman is almost always old, right? So she has to reach a certain age, and she needs to have a certain maturity, gravitas, the accumulation of white hair and wrinkles for her to be taken seriously. So the cultural coding is such that for younger women to be seen as wise is not easy. When I coach women, I find there is a big struggle. Similarly, if you look at it culturally, education has not been something that has been encouraged for women, or the seeking of knowledge. And there's plenty of data and research to show that for the past 2000 years, women's education has taken a beating. I mean, we have not encouraged girls to go out and seek knowledge and wisdom and be the learned person. Yes, if you age gracefully and you accumulate certain wisdom as a result of all of those years, there is some deference. Right? So there is some association of wisdom with you. But there is also strong conditioning that the real wise woman, the seeker, the mystic, is not something that has widespread social sanction, which is what we found. Right? So a lot of women are branded as witches and hurt or burnt. We're not encouraged to study or actively seek knowledge to the extent you can, I work, my not-for-profit does work with girls' education, and we see that after school there are many, many dropouts. Right? There is a pressure to get married. Nobody says, yeah, go be a wise seeker. And if you look at stories we have of Mirabai and Lal Ded and Akka Devi, they were the crazy ones who were in a way at the fringes of society. So that for me was the cultural code. Yes, we have wise women. There is a certain essence to that energy. How do we treat the wise women in our culture? What are beliefs associated with it? What are patterns we see in the society about our connection with the wise women? And do women hold these women within them? So these are some interesting things that come up when you start thinking about that archetype in the Indian context.
So, Nirupama, did you then arrange this in this sequence and pull out the words like Rishika and Apsara and kind of see it, or is this somebody's work that you adapted? Like, curious about who put it together first, or were you the one who put this into a journey?
Yeah, so let me say what my model, which I call the six feminine powers model, with these six distinct powers and their description, and I call them powers. And because me, the purpose of knowing is to tap into their energy. And archetypes are also seen as sources of energy and power. But that's why I call it the six feminine powers model. With these six distinct archetypes, is my creation. I haven't come across anything similar to that. People have spoken about the goddesses, right? There's Lakshmi energy and the Parvati energy and the Saraswati energy. And these are, in a way, embodiments of certain feminine energy or Shakti. People do speak about Shakti. But yeah, these six powers, in the way that I look at them, is something that I created after looking for patterns. And if I may say, combining some information with my own intuition to get some insight. And that is what has resulted in these six. So I started with four and I found something missing, and then it became five. And then when I arrived at six feminine powers, which are distinct from each other, it seemed right. So that's why that's the six feminine powers model using the archetypes.
Great. This is really pioneering work, Nirupama. So, congratulations for seeing a pattern of patterns, like seeing a journey, right? Seeing a journey that also perhaps is a pattern in itself for women, that they go through these stages. So
exactly,
almost like a meta archetype, that you mapped archetypes in a sequence and seen that across.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say they are not necessarily sequential. So I see them as a circular arrangement, and any of these can be evoked at any stage of life. So you're right. For women, we can associate certain archetypes with certain stages of life where they show up. And they show up at a certain of life. Whether we access them and allow them and engage with them will differ from person to person. So
Right.
all of us have access to all of these six. Some might be more dominant, some are less dominant, some don't show up at all, depending, of course, upon our context and culture and the messages that we receive from people around us in our environment.
That's yeah, I mean, that's interesting because that leads me to this question, which I think we also had an audience question of a similar nature, which is like, what do I do with archetypes? Do I become an archetype? Am I many archetypes? Do I identify an archetype? What is the application of this in my life? I think that was
Yeah,
a series of questions that Naga asked from Bhumi. I think Naga is in the audience also. Yeah. So
yeah,
yeah. So what is this connection then? Are archetypes to be
yeah,
evoked? Are they to be lived? Like,
yeah. So there's a lot of research and a lot of work very eminent people like Carl Jung have done with archetypes, and they use archetypes, in doing therapy, psychoanalysis, psychotherapy. So people do use it. I, my way of looking at it is to simplify it and ask exactly the question. Okay, great. So what do I do with them? So for me, these all together, they become one source of personal growth and transformation.
okay.
Especially if I look at them as sources of energy. Each archetype has a positive side, right, and a dark side. So, for example, if you take the Kanya is what I call the good girl. In her bright side, which is when she's governed by her needs and her goals and dreams, and the bright side, she is a wonderfully loyal, pleasant, charming, innocent, trusting, a good girl, a good companion, a nice friend. She's a nice girl, really. But for her, the dark side is when there is fear, when there is the dark side of a Kanya becomes a very submissive, docile people pleaser without any agency. So that's what we
Mm.
call the darker negative pole. Similarly, the Veera is the rebel warrior, and she is brave and she's courageous and she takes risks, and there is a lot of achievement orientation for the Veera. But when she's gripped by fear, especially fear of failure, fear of losing her goals and achievement, she can become domineering, aggressive. She can become a bully. She can become reckless. She can become the tyrant. So we have a positive side. We have power blocks, which prevent us from evoking the positive side, and then we fall into the negative side. Archetypes become also our shadow. So, for us to fully understand who we are, how we work, archetypes give a language, they are a tool of access for us to
Mm.
understand ourselves better. And once we understand ourselves better, then we can make choices as to how we want to grow. And then we can take any specific actions that can be required to help us to grow in that particular direction. So
Mm.
I
Mm.
see it as, a way for giving us access to understand ourselves better. Just like like the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs tool or
Mm.
something would tell you, it doesn't mean you have to be cast in stone and you have to fall into a pattern where you're stuck for the rest of your life. But it gives you access, it gives you awareness, and it gives you a language for understanding yourself so that you can move towards growth and transformation. And in my book, I've given a detailed way in which how you can tap into these feminine powers through your body, through the mind, through intentional action, so that you can move to becoming, let's say, a wiser person or the person you want to be.
Mm. A pathway to wisdom then.
A pathway to growth, a pathway to wisdom, self-awareness. The truth is, I found it fascinating, and I hope other people would as well. And then as I started doing more, I found a lot of practical application. So it started with just, wow, this is interesting. I'm curious. How do these things translate into my life and my world? When I started watching movies, I would pick up the patterns. When I started reading books, I could say, these are patterns. So that's
Mm.
how it started. And my power, if I call it, my archetype is that of a Rishika, which is the wise woman, the curious seeker. So I love looking at patterns and saying what's happening, how cool is this, and one idea will lead to another idea. But I think the coach and the facilitator in me said, hey, this could be something I can use for my work to help myself myself and to help others, which is what led to the book and which is what led to the model. And I also have a psychometric tool that I created so that people can find out their own power profile.
This powerful book is called Powerful. So for all those who
Yeah,
are
exactly. Keep it
powerful book,
simple, right? Yeah.
yes, powerful.
Yeah.
And for all those who are listening, definitely a must read. Powerful is what is available on Amazon, I'm sure, and all over as well.
Yes.
So, Powerful is the book that Nirupama has authored, her latest book. Uh, Nirupama, this is a lot of talk about women. So, the man in me is wondering whether uh, are these archetypes different for men? And then, do I have access to a Rishika archetype, for example? What would that look like if I have to, like, how does this work for across gender?
Yeah. So let me say, at its core, archetypes are gender agnostic, right? They are patterns. So if you look at Young, he created these 12 archetypes. They call the orphan, the innocent, the hero, the explorer, caregiver, the everyman. So if you look at the very core energies, you have a warrior as a male archetype, and you also have a warrior as a female archetype, right? So you have the Ma as a male as a female archetype, and there is interestingly father does not figure in archetype language, and the way men look at the father figure is very different from the way women look at the or way we look at the mother. Right? So the
Mm-hmm.
father does not feature as a parental archetype in most archetypal studies. So right, that's why it's interesting. There is caregiver, but if you look at the image we have of a caregiver, it is invariably female. If you look at the image we hold of a warrior, it is invariably male, right? So while the essence is there in both male and female, what gets social sanction, what gets approval and validated from the culture at large, these are the images that get perpetuated. Right? These are the images that we live with, and they become a part of the collective psyche as well. So, are there male archetypes? Of course, that's the default. Is all are male archetypes, and then you look at female archetypes. In fact, if you go back to Jung's theory, he says in every man there is what he calls an anima or a feminine energy, and in every female there is an animus or masculine energy. So when we are able to integrate the two, then we go towards what we call individuation and growth, rather than looking purely as masculine and feminine. But yes, but if you've seen, archetypes are images, and we have an instinctive association of
Yes,
these
yes,
images with either a male figure or a female figure.
true.
Right? So when you say jester, you can't think of a woman in that. You think of some masculine archetype as as a jester, right? So trickster, for example, the image that comes to you is that of a male character, male person. So our associations with these archetypes
Our gender.
invariably fall into gendered patterns because that's the way our society and world has been. But otherwise, yeah, there are patterns in our psyche that exist.
Sounds like a fascinating world. So, Nirupam, I'm just going to take a minute to check with our audience if the audio is
Sure.
okay, because the video was lagging a bit. So, just 30 seconds to
Okay.
just, if people can kind of on the chat box, are they being able to hear the audio correctly, or do we need to turn off the video so that your audio may work better? I just want to check because I was getting some lag. So, if the audience can just type on the chat box whether it's okay, or just maybe even do a thumbs up so that we know that the audio is working fine. Okay, so audio is good. I think I just was it's lagging in between, but largely fine, manageable lag. Okay, so the lag is manageable, fine. So we're good. We're okay uh, on on audio.
Yeah, I
So
can hear you.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
yeah. So as long as I was feeling the hero archetype because I was like, oh, the audio is lagging, and I need to listen more carefully, and I need to hold this all together, and I
Yeah.
be brave. And then suddenly I was like, what am I doing here? Can I just like chill and check with everybody? Like, why was unconsciously I trying to? Why was I trying to hold it all together and be brave when I could just have checked? So I guess I caught myself trying to be,
Be
be
the hero. And that's lovely. I mean, look at the body, the expression,
that.
everything
Yes,
changes, right? When
yes,
you
yes.
evoke and you're in that,
There,
and
yes,
you are in
yes,
that
yes,
archetypal
yes,
mode.
yes.
Yes. That's,
It's very much
yes.
there. But I was curious, Nirupama, about a bit of you saying that the father archetype is missing and the teacher archetype is present. Is that, did I hear you correctly there for men?
So the teacher, the sage, the mentor, that is definitely there. But if you go to all our myths, both Greek myths as well as Indian mythologies, you don't find the father as a nurturing caregiver,
Right.
right? Whether you look at Zeus, who had a horrible relationship with his children to the extent some of them wanted to kill him, right? Or you look at our stories, you don't really come across a validation of the man as a caring parent and who looks after the children and nurtures them. That is very, very absent from our mental image, from our pattern. The
Yeah. Yeah.
father is usually the absent, is the provider. It's okay for the father to be absent. It's okay for the father to not have an active role in the child's life. Right?
Right.
So, if the relationship is there with the son, it is usually that of a duty-bound relationship. I'm duty
Hmm.
bound to my father. So, what is extolled is the dutiful nature of the relationship rather than tenderness or care or any of those
Right.
qualities that are
Right. Right.
associated with the caregiver archetype.
True. True.
And we've never had a career woman working mother archetype either. Right? So the mother is always shown as nurturing, caring, homebound, cooking. So look at all images of mother, except very, very recently, maybe the past 20, 30, 50 years. That's why there is so much, let's say, um, confusion and there is distortion right now in our archetypal images because we've lived with these for such a long time
Hmm.
that this is how a father is supposed to be, this is how a mother is supposed to be, and these are archetypal patterns. It's and what Jung says, it's so deeply embedded in our collective unconsciousness that sometimes we're not even aware of it. Just as we're not aware that, oh, right now my stomach is digesting or my heart is pumping. We're not aware of those things that our body does. Similarly, we're not really aware of the way our psyche sometimes work because it's so much a part of our unconscious, and we know the unconscious or the subconscious mind um, is much larger than the conscious mind in terms of its potency, in terms of what it can do. So that's fascinating for me to see how all of this plays
Hmm.
out.
Which then I'm saying may not be such an issue. So, for example, if I have to be a caring father, and if the caregiver archetype evokes a feminine image, and yet I could evoke that within myself and evoke my flavor of care, which may be a
Yeah.
mix of my own style with the caregiver imagery that my culture has given me, right? Like,
Yes.
it's not that I cannot access it.
Yeah, and you're right. It doesn't mean that the caregiver energy is absent in the man, not at all. It might show up in different ways. Right? So I'll give you an interesting example that one of the ladies who I was coaching, she told me. She said, she has a brother, and both of them are now concerned about their aging parents, and she lives in the same city as her parents. Her brother lives in another city. His way of caregiving is really to support his parents financially and to arrange things for them, right? To buy their tickets if they want to travel, to connect them with a travel agent, is to take care of some of those aspects. And my coachee, she said, I meet my parents every day because they stay, pretty much in the same vicinity every other day. I spend time with them. I take them to the doctor. Whenever they, want to talk to me, I am there for them. But he just comes just because he pays the bills and sends money to support them. he thinks he is doing a lot. So this is interesting dynamics that we're going. So the way he does care, but the way it shows up could be in more of the hero mode. And I'm going to save them and I'm going to be more action oriented rather than maybe just present and be more empathetic and nurturing to their everyday needs. It doesn't mean the caregiver is absent, but it shows up in certain ways because that's the image, that's the way the psyche is embedded in us. So if you want to evoke that kind of caregiving, energy in you, yes, it's important to connect to some caregiving archetype, right? And say that this is the way I want to give care, this is the way I want to take care. And interestingly, this is one of the few professions where we say male nurse, right, versus other professions where we say a female pilot or a woman lawyer or a woman doctor. That's how they used to be called. They used to be called lady doctors or a lady pilot. Uh, we actually only place where we say is male nurse because nursing has traditionally not been associated with men. Right? Now, of course, I think anybody can do any job if they're competent and capable. But these images are so deeply entrenched in our psyche that even today, house husbands are kind of looked upon as an anomaly, right? Can you imagine a man? Can you imagine a man staying at home and cooking and taking care of the kids while a woman goes out to work? Both
Still,
genders are not comfortable with that.
yeah, still fairly rare. Yeah,
Still fairly rare. And I'm saying it's not just men or women. Both men and women are, a little uncomfortable with that image itself. It's not seen as normal. It's not seen as
yeah,
the way things are. And nobody's saying it's not a question of right or wrong, but because it's not there, we are facing a lot of these issues. Women are paid less. There is a gap in pay between men and women. A whole lot of things show up because we ourselves don't know what to do with these two very, very atypical images and energies.
true. And if you're going against a ancient cultural habit, there is almost a resistance, right? Like there's unconscious resistance also because the
Yeah,
entire baggage
yeah,
of culture is against you, and you're actually pushing against so much more, right? Both the man and the woman, right?
exactly.
Just so
Yeah,
easy to snap
absolutely.
into the existing archetypes of
Archetype.
gender roles also. Much harder to push.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. It is because it's in our psyche and we're not even aware of it. Right?
Right.
So that's interesting the concept of the shadow, right? Which is the dark side of us, which we don't own, which we don't recognize. And we see its extreme and we disown it and we don't develop that part. Right? So, for example, men are seen as weak or effeminate if they do some things. And that's seen as a very undesirable quality in your
True.
typical macho
Yeah,
hero man. Right?
yeah, yeah.
So, and that becomes this. So, not acknowledging that they have this nurturing, tender, caregiving side becomes a big collective shadow for the men. It's in my view, it's unused potential.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas, yeah, sorry, you were saying something.
Yeah, I mean, similarly for the women, right? So I found it so interesting. I was doing a session and we were looking at the 6 archetypes, and we found most women scored very low on this one called the Apsara. Right? And I call the Apsara the seductive beauty, or you call her the influential expressor. So the Apsara is celestial limbs, and there's a certain energy, there's a certain power associated with the Apsara woman who likes to be in the spotlight, who's an entertainer, who's an expressor, who is without restraints, who's not worried about what people are going to think of her. And it's very dangerous. So collectively, we have disowned this energy. And you see it in our cultural patterns. Devdasis were once very respected, but then they became seen as prostitutes. And there is a lot of, how shall I say, negative energy associated with the Apsara archetype. Because culturally, we believe women should not be embodying some of these qualities. And by disowning that, we also disown certain other bright, positive side qualities that the Apsara has, the ability to
True,
express
true,
herself, the
true.
ability to be creative, the ability to say what she thinks in her mind without
Mm-hmm.
filters,
Uh,
freedom. So all of that is not within easy access because of so much of this
you
image and
lose
pattern
both,
we
yeah.
have of
You
this.
lose the gift
Yeah,
and the shadow both when you disown something.
absolutely, absolutely. So we disowned it, and invariably, all women said, "We have trouble networking. We have trouble with the spotlight. We have trouble building a personal brand. I can't go and talk about my achievements. It's not the done thing. My work will speak for itself." And in all these sessions, we say, "But you need to do this, because now you're a working woman. You have a career. You are out there. You're competing. But it doesn't come naturally." Not all, I would say to many women, and my research also shows it doesn't come naturally because this is an archetype. We don't encourage the positive side of
the the woke circles that we tend to hang out in, it was interesting. I just had my birthday and I asked my daughter and my partner both what would they like to see more of, and the answers that came were they'd like me to pierce and wear kajal and be way more fluid in the way I carry myself, because it's almost like my psyche and my physical expression of it are not matching. Like it's almost like I'm being too restricted. So it was interesting that the
it.
evocation from the women in my life is not to be more Vardana, it's to be more
Mm,
fluid with both. So it
fluid.
was interesting that we're in such an interesting time right now where
We are,
all this is getting
exactly. Yeah,
renegotiated and
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
You can
yeah.
see it's still strongly entrenched, but you can see the shifts and you can feel the resistance as well. Both
Yeah,
are
the
happening.
nudge is coming from the women in my life, so it was quite fascinating how in these circles, at least that we're in, it
Yeah.
moves. Uh, Rupama, also, is there a men also? Like, did you also take a crack at like the 6 stages for men, or was there already one? Or how does the men thing work? Like,
Yeah.
is there a equivalent of each, like sage, king, or is it the four magician, warrior,
It's
king,
the
and
four. It's the four are there. The 12 are there. And there's another very interesting framework by John. Somebody I forget the name, which talks of the stages for men from
six
beloved
stages?
son, six. Yeah, beloved son, cowboy, warrior, lover, sage. So it does exist, and I know if you look at our own culture, um, you know, the five Pandavas have also been thought to embody five distinct archetypal powers. Right? So it is there. It's there in many forms. After my book came out, a lot of men did come up to me and say, "Tell me what is the male equivalent of Kanya Apsara Rishika Vida?" And I said, "I'll have to do some more research." But male archetypes have been around for a very long time. And, the King Warrior Magician, almost all the 12, and there are many versions of the male archetypes as well.
Yeah. I'm also wondering, Nirupama, are events also archetypical? Like when you say patterns, aren't there archetypical events which are like literally repeating habits of life? They just keep happening all the time and they're inevitable. Like I'm wondering if it's only personalities or also events are archetypical in nature and reverberate across time. Is that something
Yeah.
you've researched or your experience on that?
So, if you look at it, events are also connected to a kind of a collective energy displayed by humans, right? So that's pretty much what it is. What is the energy that you are seeing right now, and what is the energy that is getting perpetuated more? You will see. So if you look at you know. I think Ken Wilber's integration model, the different stages, how we move in terms of different consciousness of the human being, in terms of where we were, let's say the cavemen, and then we moved to an agricultural society, to an industrial society. So, pretty much male archetypes are dominating all the way. And now you're moving into this new information age economy, which is more gender neutral. It doesn't have that strong masculine feminine energy. Yeah, you might see certain events that are happening, right? along with the rise of the feminine energy, you're seeing more female leaders in the world. Still very few, but you're seeing more. It also coincides with the rise of many typical male leaders. You
Yes,
have a
yes,
Trump, you have a Putin, right? To some extent, you will say you have a Mr. Modi, you have the Duartes, you have Bolsonaro, right? So you're as women, the feminine energy is increasing. You also see in terms there's a resistance. You're seeing very strong what we call hyper masculine energies
yes,
also
yes.
rising up in a way to counter this rising feminine energy as well. So you could look at it, and I would say not maybe in terms of individual events, but patterns that we see.
That are
What's really
happening.
happening?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are many more wise, intelligent people who are able to track this and see this. But this is just uh, I think at a very broad macro level from what I'm seeing. It's not a coincidence, right? You're seeing
The
the Me
rise.
Too movement, you're seeing Black Lives Matter, you're seeing climate change, which is in a way they say the Earth, the feminine Earth energy trying to reassert itself with all this climate change activism going on. So yeah, it's interesting if you look at it through that lens as well.
So, Nirupama, since a lot of your work is around gender, uh, as a man, I'll share my experience of being a man in what I call the woke circles, like circles which are
Okay,
very
the work
aware
circle.
about, yeah, the very aware about gender, and it's like a regular conversation, and you can't like not be with it. And it's like men also. There's a very
Yeah,
high. I would say there's a
yeah.
high bar for men to hold equality and not revert to patriarchal ways. I think, and it's a fair, not saying it as a complaint at all, but just marking out the space as having its own subculture, I would say. And I think the question that comes to me as a man is, how does one respond to the rise of the feminine? Is it to embrace my own masculine more strongly? Is it to move more gender fluid? Is it to just surrender and allow the feminine to take stage? Like what really is a response to this rise of the feminine? What's a healthy response?
So I would say, obviously embrace the change because I strongly, it is yin and yang, right? So you need both to be whole and complete. And that's what I say. Powerful to me, being powerful doesn't mean grabbing power from men or overthrowing the patriarchy with some form of matriarchy. That is not going to work because the domination of any one energy has not served humankind well. I have to stop myself from saying mankind because that's what comes very automatically. So now, if we start thinking of ourselves as human beings first, then it's important to, uh, yeah, just I think as you say, be more fluid. Look at it as an opportunity and see how you can integrate some of that and be a part of it rather than resist it. So you look at all the events; they are leading up to this, right? And then it's my wish that it lead to really true equity between men and women, where both can shoulder both responsibilities. And I felt very, very simply inside the house and outside the house, right? Both have an equal say in the world and the way the world is run. And you don't see any one energy overpowering or dominating the other. So if I look at it very practically, it means having conversations very simply inside. Tell some of the clients, just let's sit and talk exactly as you said, ask these questions. What does it mean for me to be a man today, or even women are struggling. So one man, I was in a panel, one man said, what's the problem, there's so much women empowerment going on these days, how can women complain, right? Very different lens. But the truth is, women are struggling because now you've opened up another aspect of your psyche. Right? You're no longer just the caretaker, caregiver. Now you've also become the provider. And we see families with single parents more and more, right? More and more in India, overseas, where the single parent is in a way needing to integrate masculine and feminine energies to make it work. So social structures are changing. So I believe the call is for integration and acceptance rather than resistance. So have these candid conversations, be curious, understand what it means for you, and approach this moment, I think, if you call moment in time, right? This is the zeitgeist which is there with curiosity and excitement for possibilities rather than seeing it as a threat or a challenge to status quo.
That's a
And I
nice
don't
vision,
know what the
Nirupama.
world is going to be, right? But this is what is going on right now.
Yeah. The vision for an integrated future is a beautiful vision. I'm going to come, Nirupama, to now that we're in the last segment of our
Yeah.
conversation, just a few very individual questions that some of our listeners had also asked. And I'm also inviting others if they want to send in questions. How does one build archetypical literacy, right? Is it books or is it just reflection? Like, how does one get literate about saying, oh, this is the archetype that's showing up? This is like, how does one build that literacy?
I think the simple way is to just become more knowledgeable and wise about it through reading, through discussions. Uh, people can work with therapists, counselors who are familiar with archetypes if they want to use it and tap into it. There are many, many, many ways for personal growth and transformation. So there are
That's,
1,000 paths you want to take.
yeah, so
This is
several
one of them.
reading and through therapy
Yeah, 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 yeah.
but is it true, Nirupama, that worshipping an archetype, does that evoke the energy? Like if I worship a certain god or a certain archetype even, that would actually start impacting me and evoking that archetypical energy in me? Is that how it works?
Yeah, yeah, I would say connect to the energy, or I would call it more of evoking the energy. Worshipping puts a distance between you and the energy. A lot of people worship the goddess in our country, right? But it doesn't mean they are evoking the goddess energy in them. We do it, of course, at a very subconscious level, we are doing it. Very simply, before the exams, you're supposed to pray to Saraswati because she's the goddess of knowledge. During Diwali, we, pray to Lakshmi. And that is a form of evoking a particular energy in you. So it doesn't have to
Hmm.
be a goddess, it could be some image, some symbol that you can connect to and really draw energy and power from, right? And it doesn't have to be just a goddess, it could be anything that you connect to, that you think of, and that gives you strength and energy for a particular pattern, for something that you want to invite into your life.
Like,
So I would
yeah,
say
evocation is the
prayer, evocation, all of that, with a strong connection with that, with a strong connection with that energy. Yeah, I would say, yeah, if you want to destroy stuff, you'll say pray to the destroyer God, right? So stuff like that. Yeah, but it's more than that. It's taking that energy for yourself and uh, seeing how it manifests in your life.
Mm-hmm. What about historical figures? Would they then be historical because they personified certain archetypes and like Gandhiji, for example, like what's that? Is it an archetype in itself or is it an evocation of certain primal archetypes? Like how do you see historical figures like in this from this lens?
Yeah. So archetypal thinking and research usually looks more at mythology rather than history. But of course,
Okay.
the two are connected, and we can draw from historical figures as well in terms of what we see as the primary energy they embody. So,
Hmm.
when I was writing, I was trying to look for relatable examples, right? Um, and I don't, honestly, I think Mahatma Gandhi could do what he did because he was able to integrate all the energies needed, right? So, in a way, he was the hero, but he was also a caregiver in many ways, right? So he
Yes.
embodied multiple archetypal energies
To respond.
which were
Yeah.
required for that particular time. Right? So
Right.
non-violence is a very atypical warrior philosophy, but in his own way, he was fighting, if you call fighting the colonial powers, but he did it in a very different way. So most
Right.
of these people who stand out, who are pioneers, who've done something different, have been able to integrate the archetypal energies in a very unique way, right?
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
In a way that completely serves them and the cause they support. And
Beautiful. Yeah.
sometimes we evoke an energy as a persona, which is the face we want to present to the world, but it may not be genuinely who we are. And then, we might fall into the dark side of that energy. We try to become somebody without fully integrating it, right?
Hmm.
So, like one of the examples I give, and this is, I will say it is my theory, is that of Jayalalitha, the erstwhile chief minister of Tamil Nadu, who went from being a very her persona went from glamorous young film actress to Amma, the mother goddess, right? But both of them were personas. She took on the mother goddess persona to serve a particular end. But I don't think she fully integrated. So there's a tendency to fall into the excesses of the mother goddess as this
Hmm.
all powerful goddess who could rule people, right? Rather than embodying the other aspects of the Maya energy. So it's also interesting if you study historical figures and
Very
powerful
interesting.
figures.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You can draw your own inferences from what are the archetypes they embody, whether it's positive, whether it's their dark side, and how did it really serve them in
True.
their cause or what they set out to do.
So, Nirupama, this integration is evoking for me authenticity, right? Like when I integrate an archetype, I'm
Yeah,
authentically
exactly.
becoming that, right? And if I'm
Yes.
pretending to be that archetype or
Yeah.
manipulatively using that archetype, then it's kind of
Yeah.
the persona. Is that right?
It is. Yeah. In a way, I mean, it's the energy with which you would be doing something would not be perceived as the authentic energy, right? It's temporary. You may not be able to embody it fully, right? So suppose you say, hey, tomorrow I want to have a courageous conversation and I want to evoke all my Vira energy, but you're not able to fully connect to it, embody it, settle into it, your conversation might not be very, very effective. So
Hmm.
this might require some what we, in our work circles, maybe we call inner work, right? So
Some inner work and some
some inner work and
connecting.
all
Yeah,
of
yeah.
that, yeah, all of that stuff. Which is just a way of saying figure it out better and practice it, and rather than faking it, right?
Right,
See
right.
see, that it's sitting with you properly when you go in to do something.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think that itself is a practice in itself to evoke the archetype and then to authentically integrate it and to live it. That itself is such a a very, very rich world that I think I think this is a beautiful, rich world, Nirupama, that you have explored and opened up for many others also. And I think sometimes I'm just wondering, like even the act of naming an archetype like Rishika clearly opens, it's almost like you opened up the possibility for more people to walk into it, right? Like you're literally doing that.
That's the idea. That is the idea, right? So it's very interesting. Sometimes when I do sessions, people will say things like, "I need to increase my Rani and to reduce my Ma." So that's a fun way of saying it, but I know what they mean. You can't increase your Rani and reduce your Ma, but you really what you're saying is these are certain behaviors and mindsets that I have which are related to the Rani archetype that I need to manage because it's not serving me. And there are certain behaviors and mindsets related to the Ma that I need to evoke and display more. So yes, in that sense, it gives a language, and for me, it's always very exciting to hear people use this language as well.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, I'm just closing this with admiration for the powerful act of creation that you done, right? Because it's not creation at a level of an organization. It's literally like creation at the level of language, and that's quite profound that you were able to birth something like this. So, uh, yeah, I guess I'm only now comprehending the kind of work you been able to do by naming a possibility or by evoking something. So a lot of gratitude on behalf of the collective
Thank you.
for really doing this work. I think it's precious work, and it's like I just feel it's an extended release. It'll take a while for people to perhaps grasp
Right.
the extent to which what you tinkered with and birthed. So thank you for doing what you have done. Thank you for inspiring so many people. I'm sure so many women also. So just closing this with a lot of gratitude, Nirupama. Thank you for
Thank you
accepting
so
the
much.
invitation. Thank you so much for this work, this really powerful work. I just close with the hope that more and more people get connected to this work.
I
And
hope so. That is my wish. So, interestingly, if I use it on myself, I have my Rishika power makes it easy for me to come up with the concept and write the book. But if my vision is to take this work to more and more people around the world, I need to evoke my own Veda and Apsara in order to make it happen.
okay, so the journey never ends,
The
right? It's
journey
always
is all it's yeah, like you
it's
have
an
to
ongoing.
transform your and work on yourself first, and so I see myself doing that, doing evoking archetypes which are not natural to me, but doing that in the service of a cause and something that's very important to me. So thank you so much for
More power to that. Thank you, everyone.